far back in time. More than 1 million years ago, the Earth is already old, yet the human story is still only beginning. The continents rest in shapes familiar to us today, though coastlines shift as oceans rise and fall. Africa stretches wide beneath the sun, its plains alive with tall grasses, scattered trees, and rivers that cut through the land. Across these landscapes, ancient hominins walk upright, carrying with them simple stone tools and the instincts of survival. They do not yet know how to shape fire at will, but the traces of their encounters with flame will one day be found, buried in the ground, waiting to be studied. The first evidence comes not in the form of grand bonfires or clear hearths, but in the faintest of remains. Small pieces of charcoal, microscopic ash embedded in cave floors, layers of soil darkened by ancient burning. Archaeologists sift carefully through these sediments, separating grains of sand from tiny flecks of blackened wood. In places like Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, layers reveal controlled burning more than 1 million years ago. The charcoal is not spread chaotically, as if from a wildfire sweeping past. It is concentrated, found deep inside the cave where natural flames could not easily reach. Something more deliberate is suggested here, something connected to human presence. Yet, mysteries remain. Scientists debate whether these fires were fully controlled or only opportunistically tended. Perhaps early humans carried burning branches from wildfires, keeping embers alive for days. Perhaps they placed dry grass and wood upon the glowing remains, learning slowly how to coax flame from fading heat. What is certain is that fire was no stranger to the landscapes they inhabited. Africa's savannas burned naturally each dry season. Lightning set grasses alight. Flames rolled like waves across the plains, leaving blackened earth that sprouted green again after rain. Early humans would have watched. They would have smelled the smoke, seen animals flee, and noticed how cooked roots or roasted carcasses tasted different after the fire passed. The survival of our ancestors was shaped by these encounters. Fire could be dangerous, but it could also be a resource. Its warmth eased cold nights. Its light pushed back the dark, and its transformative power touched food, tools, and even social life. Long before permanent mastery, fire entered human awareness as a force to be studied, approached, and eventually embraced. Far beyond the savannas, geological forces shaped the planet. Ice sheets thickened in the north, and climates fluctuated over long cycles. Dry periods expanded deserts, forcing human groups to move. Wet periods filled rivers and lakes, bringing abundance. In each rhythm of climate, fire was present. Sometimes lightning fell in distant storms, sparking fires visible across valleys. Sometimes volcanic eruptions spread ash over the land, filling the skies. Planetary forces framed human experience, and fire was one of the most visible signs of this ever-changing Earth. One of the lesser-known clues comes from the patterns of heated stone tools. Archaeologists studying hand axes and flakes found discoloration, evidence that the stones had been exposed to high temperatures. In certain sites, these tools appear deliberately placed within fire. The heat altered their surfaces, sometimes even making them easier to flake. Such details hint at experimentation. Not only were early humans sitting near fires, they may have been exploring how fire could change the materials they used. But here lies an unresolved mystery. Did these experiments represent intentional knowledge? or were they byproducts of living near hearths? A stone left too close to embers might accidentally crack. A tool dropped in flames could discolor. To decide whether such evidence marks purposeful technology or incidental damage is a challenge for archaeologists today. And so the debate continues. Fire remains both obvious and elusive in the record, its traces fragile, its presence undeniable. At this stage, hominins are not alone on Earth. Other human lineages walk in different regions, adapting to varied climates. But in Africa, where much of our story begins, the presence of fire is deeply tied to caves, valleys, and riverbanks where groups gathered. Wonderwerk Cave, with its long, dark chambers, holds some of the oldest ash. Here, layers of burned bone and plant remains suggest that fire was not only encountered, but maintained. The cave lies far from the open savanna, meaning flames had to be brought inside. Natural lightning fires could not easily reach so deep underground. This detail strengthens the case for deliberate human use. Step by step, we begin to see how important this shift was. Without fire, nights would have been darker, colder, and more dangerous. Predators prowled. The chill of evening winds pressed close. Fire offered something different. Even if not yet created at will, it was carried, sheltered, and valued. The glow of embers might have served as a gathering point. The warmth might have allowed longer rest. Over generations, these small changes accumulated, shaping behavior in ways that archaeology can only partly reconstruct. Consider the scale. 1 million years is an expanse of time longer than all recorded history, many times over. Civilizations rise and fall in mere thousands of years. Yet here, across hundreds of millennia, humans and their ancestors learned slowly, step by step, to live with fire. The story unfolds not in sudden leaps but in gradual adaptation, repeated over countless generations. The patience of prehistory contrasts with the speed of modern life. But in that slowness lies the foundation of human culture itself. As we look back, we can picture landscapes flickering at night. The stars shine overhead, constant across ages. Below, a small group of hominins gathers near a faint glow. The fire is weak, tended with dry twigs. Sparks rise and vanish into the dark. Around them stretch vast plains where herds graze by day, and predators roam by night. For the first time, light other than the moon pierces the darkness. A fragile beginning, yet one that will echo through all of human history. The evidence is fragmentary, the interpretations debated, but the message is clear. Fire was present, fire was known, and fire was slowly becoming part of the human world. The embers of deep time still glow within the soil, silent witnesses to this earliest partnership between humankind and flame. Across the heart of Africa, long before cities, long before writing, the savannas stretch wide beneath the open sky. The land is a mosaic of grass and tree, patterned by the rhythm of wet and dry. When rains fall, grasses grow tall, animals graze, and rivers swell. When the season turns, dryness returns, and the land changes color. Brown replaces green, rivers shrink, and winds carry dust across the plains. In these dry months, storms bring lightning without rain. Bolts strike the brittle grasses, and the savanna burns. Fire is not a rare visitor here. It is a seasonal force. Flames sweep quickly, racing with the wind, covering kilometers in a single day. Trees with thick bark survive, their roots protected. Grasses fall, but they regrow quickly once rain returns. Animals adapt as well. Antelope and zebra move ahead of the flames. Birds circle above, catching insects, fleeing the heat. For predators, fire can be opportunity, exposing prey in sudden clearings. For ancient human, too, the savanna fire was both danger and lesson. Archaeologists studying these environments note that hominins lived among fire-shaped landscapes for hundreds of thousands of years. Fire was not always destructive. After the flames, new shoots appeared, attracting grazing animals. Charred ground drew herds, and with them came chances for hunting and scavenging. In this way, fire indirectly guided human survival. Even before control, its patterns shaped movement, food availability, and the possibilities of life on the savanna. Small fragments of charcoal buried in ancient soils confirm how frequent these burns were. In East Africa, lake sediments preserve layers of microscopic charcoal stretching back over 1 million years. Each layer records a season of fire, evidence that these landscapes were never static. Instead, they pulsed with rhythm, growth, burning, regrowth. Early humans walked within this cycle, learning through observation, responding through adaptation. One lesser-known detail is that some sites reveal bones of animals partially charred, but not in hearths. These are likely the remains of carcasses left after grass fires, singed by natural flames. Hominins may have approached such remains, tasting for the first time meat altered by fire. The difference would have been clear. Cooked flesh is softer, easier to chew. Certain toxins in plants break down when exposed to heat. Even if cooking was not yet deliberate, the savanna offered accidental lessons. From these encounters, curiosity could grow. Yet here lies a scientific mystery. Did early humans actively follow the paths of wildfires, seeking what flames left behind? Or did they only encounter burnt landscapes by chance? Archaeologists debate this, as direct evidence is elusive. Some argue that groups may have trailed the smoke, knowing that prey would be exposed. Others suggest fire's role was more incidental, its benefits discovered unpredictably. The question remains open, echoing across the study of human origins. How much of fire's early role was intentional, and how much accidental? The scale of fire's reach is planetary. Even today, satellite images show how much of Africa burns each dry season. Entire regions glow at night with lines of flame stretching across the land. The same must have been true in the distant past. From high ground, early humans would have seen the horizon flicker with orange light. The sky filled with haze. The scent of smoke lingered for days. Fire reshaped entire ecosystems, not only locally, but across continents. Its presence influenced atmospheric chemistry, soil fertility, and the very distribution of plants and animals. The savanna fire cycle may have indirectly encouraged the spread of grassland species, which in turn supported the growth of large grazing herds. And those herds became vital to hominin life, whether hunted, scavenged, or simply tracked for survival. Thus, fire was not only an environmental background, it was a silent architect of ecological webs in which humans were enmeshed. Step by step, knowledge deepened. To live in Africa 1 million years ago meant to live with fire as a regular feature of life. It could not be ignored. It demanded awareness, demanded respect, and slowly, the association between flame and opportunity became stronger. Another subtle piece of evidence lies in the distribution of stone tools found near ancient burn sites. At some locations, tools cluster in layers with high charcoal content, suggesting that humans stayed near recently burned areas. Why? Perhaps because such areas were rich in grazing animals. Perhaps because visibility was greater, reducing the risk of ambush. Or perhaps because fire itself had become an attractor, drawing both humans and prey into open spaces where survival strategies could play out. Still, the line between adaptation and mastery is thin. Fire could not yet be started at will. Lightning remained the great provider of flame. But the presence of humans near fire was not random. It suggests a growing awareness. The landscape was no longer simply endured. It was read, interpreted, and used. Fire, even uncontrolled, became part of human strategy. Consider the experience of watching a fire approach. Flames roll with the wind. The crackle of burning grass carries far. Heat presses forward in waves. Early humans, like animals, must have fled at times. Yet, when the fire passed, what remained was valuable: fresh grazing, exposed roots, weakened trees that could yield wood. From destruction came renewal, and humans, alert and observant, learned to recognize this. The savanna itself offered the perfect classroom. Unlike dense forests, where fire could smolder unseen, the open grasslands displayed every stage of burning clearly: sparks, flame, smoke, ash, regrowth, all unfolded in visible sequence. To live on these plains was to live inside the cycle of fire, season after season. Planetary cycles overlapped with this rhythm. Climate shifts altered rainfall, changing the extent of burning. During wetter periods, grasses spread widely, fueling even larger fires when drought returned. During drier intervals, deserts expanded, reducing fire's reach but intensifying its impact when it came. Hominins navigated these cycles, moving with herds, gathering plants, and carrying their knowledge forward. Over immense timescales, the repetition of fire-shaped memory, even without language as we know it, experiences passed through generations. The sight of smoke on the horizon, the smell of charred grass, the taste of roasted tubers, these impressions accumulated, forming an unspoken tradition. One day, much later, they would help guide the leap from encountering fire to keeping it, and from keeping it to making it. In this way, the African savannas were more than habitat. They were teachers. Their fires offered early humans the first lessons in the nature of flame. And while much is lost in time, the soil preserves enough to remind us fire was never a stranger here. It was a companion from the beginning, shaping both land and life in ways subtle and profound. Deep beneath layers of soil, in places long abandoned by people, lie fragments of a story written not in ink, but in ash. Charcoal is fragile, black, and easily overlooked. Yet, to archaeologists, it is a powerful witness. In caves and open-air sites across Africa and beyond, tiny flecks of burned wood have been sifted from sediments more than 1 million years old. Each fragment tells of a fire that once burned, and of humans, ancient ancestors, who lingered nearby. The science of uncovering such evidence is delicate. Charcoal, when preserved, is rarely obvious. It may appear only as small black specks, barely visible against the surrounding grains of sand. To recover it, researchers wash sediments, examine them under microscopes, and identify structures within the carbonized wood. These structures still reveal the cells of the plant, even after so many millennia. Through this careful work, the ancient presence of fire is confirmed. One of the most remarkable sites is Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa. Deep inside its chambers, more than 30 meters from the entrance, archaeologists discovered microscopic ash and burned bone fragments. These are not traces of wildfires that swept the savanna. Flames from lightning could not have reached so far into the cave. Instead, the evidence points to fire carried in, tended, and used. Radiometric dating places these layers at around 1 million years ago. This discovery is among the earliest clear indications that humans were not only encountering fire but beginning to manage it. Still, interpretation is not straightforward. Charcoal can be moved by water or blown by wind. Bones can burn in many ways. Distinguishing between natural events and deliberate activity is one of the great challenges of paleoanthropology. At Wonderwerk, however, the repeated presence of ash across different layers, combined with stone tools and other occupation evidence, strengthens the case for human involvement. Here, deep underground, ancient groups gathered around flames that they had kept alive. Beyond South Africa, similar though less certain traces appear. In East Africa, sites along ancient lake margins show burned sediments mixed with tools. In the Levant, at places like Gesher Benot Yaakov in Israel, fire evidence dating to nearly 800,000 years ago appears in association with stone tools and plant remains. Charcoal in these contexts is not spread chaotically, but clustered, as if linked to hearths. Each discovery adds to a pattern, scattered but consistent signals that humans were not passive observers of fire, but participants in its story. One lesser-known detail comes from the analysis of phytoliths, tiny silica structures formed in plants. When plants burn, their phytoliths remain, often alongside charcoal. At Gesher Benot Yaakov, scientists found phytoliths showing signs of heating, alongside edible plant remains such as waternuts and seeds. This suggests that fire was used not only for warmth or light, but perhaps already for food preparation. Such evidence pushes the history of cooking further back than once imagined. Yet here lies a mystery. If humans had access to fire for so long, why does its evidence appear sporadically? Archaeological layers sometimes span tens of thousands of years with no sign of burning. Some researchers suggest that fire use was not continuous but episodic, learned, lost, and relearned across generations. Others argue that the evidence is simply too fragile, easily erased by erosion, water, or the passing of time. The soil holds answers, but also gaps that may never be filled. The planetary scale of fire's impact is also revealed through charcoal, layers of ash preserved in lakes, oceans, and even ice cores track the history of burning vegetation across the world. These records show that fire has been part of Earth's system for tens of millions of years, long before humans appeared. But around 1 million years ago, the fingerprints of fire begin to intersect with the presence of hominins. In cave after cave, site after site, the soil records not only the rhythm of natural fire, but also its association with tools, bones, and human settlement. Consider how subtle the act of keeping fire must have been. To tend a flame is to balance fuel and air. Too much wood, and it smothers. Too little, and it fades. Early humans may have carried embers in hollowed branches, or wrapped in leaves, transporting them from one place to another. If flames died, they waited again for lightning or sought fire from others. Each success left a trace, a scatter of ash, a piece of charred wood, a layer of soil darkened by heat, These traces are what we now recover, one grain at a time. Charcoal is not only evidence of fire itself, but of decision-making. To bring wood into a cave required effort. To feed flames over hours meant attention. To gather near the warmth suggested a recognition of value. These choices, preserved as fragments in the earth, speak of the growing relationship between humans and fire. One fragment, smaller than a fingernail, may carry within it the memory of a night long past. Perhaps a group sheltered in a cave as winds howled outside. The embers glowed faintly, crackling as twigs were added. Sparks leapt, then settled. Around them lay stone tools, shaped from local rock. Bones from hunted or scavenged animals lay nearby, some darkened by flame. Over time, ash mixed with soil, pressed down by footsteps, and buried beneath layers of dust. Thousands of generations later, archaeologists kneel with brushes, uncovering this scene in silence. The fragility of charcoal is striking. Rain can wash it away. Wind can scatter it. Buried too deep, it can decay beyond recognition. That any survives at all is remarkable. And yet, across continents, these fragile remains accumulate into a consistent story that humans encountered, kept, and eventually mastered fire. Scale adds perspective. 1 million years ago is a span greater than the entire existence of Homo sapiens as a species. Civilizations, languages, and histories known to us all fit within only the last few thousand years. The charcoal in the soil predates them all. It reaches back to a time when humanity itself was still forming, when the relationship with fire was just beginning. Each piece of evidence is a whisper across time. Together, they remind us that even the smallest traces can carry immense meaning. Fire left no monuments, it carved no inscriptions, but in the soil, its quiet testimony remains, marking one of the most profound shifts in the human journey. Far across the ancient savanna, fire is not always close at hand. For much of early human existence, flames appear as distant events, born of storms or volcanic eruptions. To see fire at night, flickering on the horizon, must have been both mesmerizing and unsettling. The red glow rose above the grasses, shifting with the wind, casting shadows against the sky. Early hominins, with sharp eyes attuned to movement, would have paused to watch. They could not yet summon fire at will, but they could witness its power from afar. The human relationship with fire began with observation. Long before flames were carried into caves, they were studied in silence. Lightning ignited grasses, and fires swept across valleys. Even when groups fled to safety, the spectacle left impressions: heat, crackle, the strange beauty of glowing embers in darkness. Fire was unlike any other natural force. Water, stone, wood, and wind could be touched, held, or shaped. Fire was different. It consumed and transformed. It lived only so long as it was fed. Its glow in the night drew eyes, held attention, and awakened memory. Archaeologists searching for early traces of this relationship often find themselves working not with tools, but with context. They study sites near savannas and forests, analyzing how people might have encountered flames. Charcoal layers deep inside caves tell us of tended fires. But before those moments came the long ages of wonder, ages when humans approached cautiously, staying at a distance, learning what flames could do. One lesser-known detail comes from studies of animal behavior. Certain birds in Africa today, called fire-foraging raptors, actively follow wildfires. They swoop toward the edges of flame, catching prey as it flees. Some species even appear to spread fire deliberately, carrying burning twigs to start new patches. If birds learn to use fire's power, it is not difficult to imagine early humans making similar observations. Watching animals exploit fire may have sparked new ideas, guiding humans toward their own use of flames. Yet, mysteries remain. Did early hominins fear fire above all else, avoiding it until necessity forced them near? Or did they feel drawn to it, standing at safe distances to watch the glow? Fossil and archaeological records cannot tell us what emotions filled those moments. What they can show is the gradual movement from avoidance to engagement. Sites with traces of fire use appear only after long spans of time, suggesting that this was not an instant leap. Instead, it was a slow progression, shaped by repeated exposure to fire's presence in the landscape. On a planetary scale, fire's glow was visible far beyond human eyes. Each season, as grasses dried, flames reshaped the biosphere. Ash enriched the soil, releasing nutrients that new plants could use. Smoke rose into the atmosphere, altering skies, filtering light. From above, Earth's patterns of fire were as regular as tides. For early humans on the ground, these events were vast, overwhelming, yet also predictable. Fire became part of the natural rhythm, as much a marker of season as rainfall or migration of herds. To watch fire at night must have carried a particular weight. Unlike the sun, which rose and set with certainty, fire was fragile and temporary. Its glow could appear and vanish. Lightning created it. Rain quenched it. Wind spread it. Perhaps early groups learned to read its signs. Sparks in the distance meant dry grass and danger, or opportunity after the flames passed. The red glow became part of their awareness, shaping how they moved across the land. The archaeological record also contains indirect evidence of this stage of fire use. Burnt landscapes show signs of renewed human activity after flames. At some sites, stone tools are found in layers above ash deposits, suggesting that groups returned once the danger had passed. The open clearings left by fire may have provided safer ground for resting, with fewer hiding places for predators. These patterns hint that the glow of fire was not only spectacle but also signal, a marker that the land was changing in ways humans could use. Step by step, encounters deepened. At first, perhaps humans approached only after fire burned out, touching the cooled remains, finding charcoal and singed bones. Later, they might have dared to draw closer, feeling heat on their skin, keeping to the edges where flame met darkness. Each approach carried risk, but also reward. Fire roasted seeds, cracked nuts, and left behind partially cooked meat. Over time, these repeated lessons accumulated into knowledge. One unresolved question remains: how did early humans first carry fire? Some researchers suggest embers could have been transported in thick bark or hollow logs, slowly smouldering as groups moved. Others propose that fire was kept only as long as the natural source lasted, and then lost until lightning struck again. The red glow in the distance may have been a reminder. Fire existed elsewhere, beyond reach, waiting to be gathered. The scale of these moments is difficult to grasp. A single spark carried across grassland, a single ember placed within dry leaves, could mean the difference between warmth and cold, between cooked food and raw. Yet the evidence we recover is minute specks of ash, fragments of burned bone, subtle discolorations in soil. From these traces we reconstruct vast histories, stretching across continents and epochs. Even today, watching fire from afar has a hypnotic quality. For ancient humans, with no artificial lights, the red glow must have been even more striking. Against the endless black of night, it shimmered like a second sun, fragile yet fierce. To see it was to confront both danger and possibility. Perhaps such sights planted the first seeds of reverence, a recognition that fire was a force unlike any other, a companion of both life and death. As the ages passed, wonder turned slowly to use. Fires, once watched from afar, were carried closer. Flames, once feared, were tended. The red glow in the distance became the ember at the center of a camp. Yet those first moments of awe remain part of the story. Without them, the path toward mastery might never have begun. The soil preserves the physical traces, but the sky of prehistory held the glow that captured human imagination, long before control was possible. In this way, fire's earliest chapter was not one of conquest, but of observation. The glow on the horizon taught humans to watch, to wait, to learn. It was the first invitation to approach a power that would, in time, reshape the destiny of humankind. Across southern Africa, deep within ancient limestone hills, caves open like dark mouths in the rock. For hundreds of thousands of years, these caves offered shelter to animals, birds, and eventually to humans. They shielded groups from wind and rain, gave vantage points over valleys, and provided places to rest after long days of movement. Within some of these caves, archaeologists have uncovered remarkable evidence, the oldest hearths known to science. Here, fire was not only observed or carried in, it was used repeatedly, leaving layers of ash beneath stone floors, silent testimony to early control of flame. Wonderwork Cave, stretching more than 140 meters into the rock, holds some of the clearest signs. In its layers, dating to around 1 million years ago, ash lenses appear, thin, grey sheets within the soil. Mixed within them are burned bones, tiny pieces of charcoal, and stone tools. The position of these layers, far from the cave entrance, argues strongly against natural wildfires. Flames from lightning could never have reached so deep. Instead, embers were brought inside, tended by human hands, and allowed to burn again and again. To sit around a cave hearth was to experience something new in the human story. Firelight transformed darkness. Shadows danced along walls. Heat radiated outward, softening the chill of night. For the first time, groups could remain in caves not only during daylight, but into the hours of evening. Archaeologists studying the ash layers at Wonderwerk note that they are not random scatters, but concentrated patches, suggesting that fires were lit in the same places repeatedly. These are true hearths, the beginnings of a practice that would shape all later human life. A lesser-known detail emerges from microscopic analysis of the ash. Plant remains within the layers show evidence of burning at controlled temperatures, not the extreme heat of wildfires. Some ash particles even preserve the structure of grasses, indicating that fuel was gathered deliberately. This suggests more than passive use of fire. It hints at management, perhaps even preference for certain fuels. If true, these findings point to a deepening knowledge of how fire behaved and how it could be sustained. Still, mysteries remain. Did the people of Wonderwerk truly create fire themselves, or did they still rely on lightning and other natural sources? The evidence does not answer this directly. Many scientists believe that while fire was certainly kept alive, the ability to kindle flames from scratch may have come much later. Others argue that the repeated presence of hearths suggests more advanced skills. The debate continues, shaped by every new discovery. On a planetary scale, these hearths represent a turning point. To bring fire indoors was to extend the human footprint into places once inhospitable. Caves that had been cold and dark became habitable, reshaping the geography of human settlement. Fire altered more than comfort. It changed possibilities. In colder climates, hearths allowed groups to survive nights that would otherwise have been deadly. In wetter seasons, flames dried wood, skins, and even stone tools. The cave hearth was a center of adaptation, linking humans more closely than ever to the landscapes they inhabited. At other sites in Africa and beyond, similar traces appear. In the caves of Swartkrans, burned bones dating to about 1 million years ago suggest fire use, though some researchers caution that the burning may have occurred outside and the bones later washed in. In Europe, at sites such as Vertisolos in Hungary, fire traces appear closer to 400,000 years ago. Together, these findings form a patchwork record. Some caves hold clear hearths, others preserve only ambiguous signs. Yet the overall pattern points to a slow spread of fire use, tied closely to places of shelter. Imagine the atmosphere within a cave hearth at night. Outside, predators moved in the dark, hyenas, lions, leopards. Within, a circle of light pushed them back. Sparks rose into the air, fading against stone ceilings. The smell of smoke filled the chamber, seeping into walls and clothing. Over time, soot blackened the ceilings. Marks that archaeologists still recognize today. These details are not inventions but observations. Real soot deposits remain visible in ancient caves, physical proof that fire burned there repeatedly. One unresolved question concerns social life around these hearths. Did fire change how people interacted? Did it encourage closer gatherings, longer conversations, or early forms of storytelling? Archaeology cannot answer directly, but many scholars suggest that fire extended the human day, opening new space for social life. If so, the cave hearth was more than a tool. It was a catalyst for the beginnings of culture itself. The scale of this change can be compared to distances across continents. To move from a world without fire to one with cave hearths is a transition greater than the difference between two cities oceans apart. It is a transformation in daily life, touching warmth, safety, food, and community all at once. No later technology, not even metal or writing, reshaped existence so fundamentally. The soil of Wonderwerk and other caves preserves this moment. Ash layers, though fragile, survive when sealed beneath sediment. Archaeologists dig slowly, layer by layer, recording each shift in color and texture. What appears at first as dust becomes evidence of human adaptation. Charcoal fragments under microscopes reveal their plant origins. Bones show scorching consistent with low-intensity flames. Each detail adds to a larger picture: humans in caves, hearths glowing, lives changing. And yet, so much remains unknown. Did these early groups fully grasp the potential of fire? Or did they still treat it as a fragile gift? Something to be guarded carefully against extinction. Were hearths lit nightly, or only during certain seasons? The record is silent. What we hold are fragments, enough to glimpse the outlines of a story but never its full detail. What is clear is that the cave hearth marks a new intimacy between humans and flame. Fire was no longer distant on the horizon. It was no longer only a passing visitor after storms. It was present at the center of life, enclosed within walls, altering the rhythm of days and nights. From this point onward, the path toward full mastery would accelerate, branching into cooking, technology, and the expansion of human range across the globe. In the quiet ash beneath stone floors, this history rests. Tiny black flecks, overlooked by time, speak to a revolution more profound than any monument. The cave hearth is humanity's first home within fire, a place where survival and possibility met in the glow of embers. Beneath ancient cave floors, neath stones pressed down by centuries of weight, lie thin layers of ash. To the untrained eye, they look like pale smudges in the earth, fragile and unremarkable. But to archaeologists, these layers are voices from the past. They are the residue of hearths long extinguished, of fires that once flickered and smoked in darkness. Each lens of ash is a page in the story of how humans and fire grew together, slowly, cautiously, across millennia. In Wonderwerk Cave, in Swat Krans, and in other sites across Africa, ash deposits provide evidence of repeated burning. These are not isolated accidents. They form stacked layers, one atop another, separated by soil, suggesting that fires were lit over and over again in the same spaces. Sometimes the ash is mixed with charcoal fragments, sometimes with scorched bone. In places, stone tools rest within or just above these deposits, linking fire directly to human occupation. Such patterns tell us that fire was not a single event but a recurring practice. One lesser-known detail comes from the study of burned bone fragments. Under microscopes, the color of bone reveals the temperature at which it burned. Light brown indicates low heat. Black means carbonization. White signals intense burning. At Wonderwerk Cave, bones show signs of moderate temperatures, consistent with controlled hearths rather than wildfires. This evidence strengthens the case that early humans were deliberately managing fire, feeding it carefully, not simply encountering the aftermath of natural blazes. Yet mysteries persist. How exactly were these fires maintained? Did groups keep embers smoldering across days, adding wood when needed? Or did they allow flames to die and wait for another natural source? The ash does not provide answers. It preserves what burned, but not how fire was kindled or carried. Many researchers believe that full mastery, the ability to strike sparks or generate flame by friction, came much later. But the repeated presence of ash layers makes clear that fire was already being tended, perhaps with great care. The planetary context adds weight to this story. Around 1 million years ago, Earth's climate shifted repeatedly. Glacial cycles advanced and retreated. Periods of cooling brought cold nights to regions where humans lived. In such conditions, fire was more than comfort. It was survival. Ash layers beneath stones are silent markers of this adaptation. They show that even in fluctuating climates, humans found ways to keep fire near, to make caves and shelters habitable when temperatures fell. At Gesher Beno Yaakov in Israel, ash lenses dating to nearly 780,000 years ago offer further evidence. Here, hearths are associated with burned seeds, nuts, and fish bones. The ash layers are thin but distinct, forming patches on the ancient ground surface. Their presence suggests repeated fire use in open-air setting, not only caves. This broadens the picture. Fire was not confined to dark shelters. It was part of daily life on riverbanks and lake shores, where people gathered food and tools. The ash beneath stones tells of domestic spaces, however rudimentary, where flame had a central role. A subtle yet powerful clue comes from magnetic studies of soil. When clay or sediment is heated, its magnetic minerals realign, locking in the direction of Earth's magnetic field at that time. By analyzing these signals, scientists confirm that many ash layers were indeed burned in place, not washed in by floods. This technique has been applied to sites like Wonderwerk, adding further proof that the fires were local, deliberate, and repeated. Still, unresolved questions remain. Were these fires maintained continuously, generation after generation? Or did knowledge fade and return in cycles, rediscovered each time lightning struck? Some scholars argue that early humans may have lost fire repeatedly, especially when moving into new environments where natural ignitions were rare. Others suggest that once fire was integrated into daily life, the habit of tending it was too valuable ever to abandon. The layers of ash give no final answer, leaving the debate open. Imagine the process of tending one of these ancient hearths. Wood is gathered from the savanna. Dry branches, twigs, grasses. Stones may be arranged around the edges, not yet as formal rings, but as natural boundaries. The fire is fed slowly, glowing embers protected beneath larger logs. Smoke curls upward, staining the ceiling above. Ash collects at the base, soft and powdery, gradually covering older remains. Over time, footsteps press it down, stones scatter, tools fall, bones are discarded. Each action leaves a trace, building the archaeological record we see today. On the scale of human evolution, these simple hearths were revolutionary. They allowed people to occupy colder zones, to extend activity into the night, to cook foods that were otherwise indigestible. Ash beneath stones was the footprint of a new relationship with the environment. It marked a shift from living within nature's limits to altering those limits with fire. Archaeologists sometimes describe these deposits as palimpsests, layers written over one another, difficult to disentangle. Each ash lens is a story, but stories overlap. Later, fires disturb earlier ones. Animals trample surfaces, water seeps in, sediments collapse. To recover meaning from such complexity requires patience, technology, and interpretation. Radiometric dating, microscopic analysis, chemical testing, all help separate natural from cultural fires. Even so, uncertainties endure. The scale of these hearths may have been small. A fire the size of a modern campfire could leave only a thin sheet of ash. Yet for the people who tended it, that fire changed everything. It brought light into darkness, warmth into cold, safety into danger. To find such hearths across continents is to trace the spread of a quiet but profound transformation. Ash also has symbolic weight. In later human history, ash often carried meanings of memory, death, and renewal. Whether early humans saw it in this way is unknowable, but even at this stage, ash was practical. It covered floors, reduced dampness, and in some cases may have been used to smother flames. In the soil, ash beneath stones holds both the practical and the mysterious, the known and the unknown. Over thousands of years, the repetition of fire use left deeper deposits. In some caves, ash layers reach centimeters thick, evidence of countless burnings. Each night added a little more, until the floor itself became a mixture of soil, charcoal, and bone. Today, archaeologists kneel on those same floors, reading the record left behind. What was once warm light is now cold dust, yet still it speaks. The story of ash beneath stones is not one of sudden mastery. It is a record of persistence, of slow familiarity with flame. Humans did not conquer fire in a single leap. They returned to it again and again until it became part of life. Each hearth was temporary, each fire finite. Yet together they laid the foundation for everything that followed. Beneath the stones, the ash remains, fragile, scattered, silent. But through it, we glimpse the earliest chapters of a partnership that would endure as long as humanity itself. Across the archaeological record, fire appears as ash, charcoal, and burned bone. But behind these traces lies a greater puzzle. How did early humans keep fire alive? Evidence shows that by 1 million years ago, groups were tending flames in caves and open-air sites. Yet whether they could create fire at will remains uncertain. This is the great mystery of firekeeping, a question that still divides researchers today. Fire, once started by lightning or volcanic eruption, can burn for hours or days. With care, embers can smolder far longer. Early humans may have learned to nurture such embers, feeding them with dry grass, blowing gently to coax sparks into flame. Carried in bark or hollow wood, embers might have been transported across landscapes. To keep fire was to ensure warmth, safety, and cooked food. To lose it was to return to cold nights and darkness, waiting for chance ignitions. Archaeologists search for signs of such behavior in the soil. In some caves, repeated layers of ash suggest fires rekindled in the same places again and again. This pattern may point to long-term firekeeping. At Wonderwerk Cave, ash lenses stretch across centuries of occupation, implying that groups carried fire inside whenever they returned. Yet no tools for striking sparks have been found in these early contexts. The absence leaves open the question, was fire truly mastered or only borrowed from nature? A lesser-known detail comes from ethnographic parallels. In some modern hunter-gatherer societies, people keep embers alive for days, sometimes carrying them wrapped in plant fibers as they move camp. The ability to strike new fire is rare. Instead, fire is treated as something precious, maintained carefully. These practices suggest that early humans may have relied on similar strategies. Firekeeping would have required vigilance, someone always attending the hearth, ensuring that the last ember never faded. The unresolved mystery centers on timing. When did humans cross the threshold from firekeeping to fire-making? Some argue that by 400,000 years ago, stone tool evidence begins to show possible use of fire-starting techniques, perhaps with flint and pyrite. Others believe the transition happened even earlier, though direct proof is scarce. What is clear is that for vast spans of time, humans likely lived in an intermediate stage, skilled at tending and carrying fire, but not yet able to ignite it at will. On a planetary scale, this difference mattered greatly. Firekeeping allowed groups to expand into new territories during favorable seasons, but only within reach of natural ignition sources. In wetter climates, where lightning fires were rare, survival without fire would have been difficult. This may explain why fire evidence appears intermittently across regions. Groups in fire-rich environments could sustain flames more easily. Others, lacking such opportunities, may have lost fire altogether, rediscovering it only when nature provided. Archaeologists also study the spatial arrangement of ancient hearths. In some sites, hearths are small and isolated, perhaps the work of individuals or small families. In others, multiple hearths appear side by side, suggesting larger gatherings. Each pattern raises questions about how fire was shared. Did groups cooperate, maintaining communal flames? Or did each family guard its own hearth, ensuring independence? Ash deposits alone cannot tell, but the diversity hints at varied strategies. Another subtle clue lies in burned plant remains. At Gesher Benot Yaakov, charred seeds show controlled exposure to heat, not the uncontrolled intensity of wildfires. But this implies not only firekeeping, but fire management. If plants were deliberately placed near embers, humans may already have understood how to regulate flame. Such evidence suggests that firekeeping was not passive, but active, requiring skill and foresight. Still, the practicalities remain mysterious. How often was fire lost? Did groups maintain it continuously for months, or did it die out regularly, forcing them to wait for new lightning strikes? Modern comparisons show both possibilities. Some societies prize constant firekeeping, while others allow flames to fade, confident they can obtain new fire by friction or sparks. For early humans, without such technologies, losing fire may have been disastrous, reshaping movement and settlement. Consider the effort involved. Embers must be protected from wind and rain. Wood must be gathered daily. In caves, smoke must be managed, lest it choke the occupants. Each challenge required adaptation. Firekeeping was not simply a matter of survival, it was labor, shared across the group. To succeed, communities needed cooperation, someone tending, someone collecting fuel, someone carrying embers during travel. In this sense, firekeeping may have reinforced social bonds, teaching the value of shared responsibility. At the same time, fire was fragile. A storm could extinguish it. Wet wood could smother it. Neglect could let it fade. To keep fire alive required attention at all times. Archaeological traces of repeated hearths may thus reflect not only success but also failure, with fires rekindled anew after being lost. The rhythm of early human life may have been shaped by the cycle of fire's presence and absence, abundance and loss. On the scale of human evolution, firekeeping sits between two great thresholds: the first encounters with wild flame and the later mastery of fire-making. It is a liminal stage marked by ingenuity but also dependence on nature. The ashes beneath stones, the charcoal fragments in soil, all belong to this long period of partial control. To imagine it is to picture humans neither entirely powerless nor fully independent, but living in balance with forces beyond their making. One unresolved question concerns whether different human lineages reached this stage at different times. Homo erectus, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and early Homo sapiens all show evidence of fire use in varying contexts. Did each lineage learn firekeeping independently, or did the knowledge spread across populations? The archaeological record is too sparse to decide. What is certain is that firekeeping, wherever it occurred, marked a shared step forward in human adaptation. The planetary echoes of these practices are vast. By keeping fire, humans began to alter environments more actively. Ash enriched soils. Burned clearings changed vegetation. Predators shifted patterns in response to flames. Even before deliberate landscape burning, the mere act of maintaining fire reshaped local ecologies. Firekeeping was thus not only cultural, but ecological, linking human groups more tightly to the cycles of Earth. Step by step, this fragile practice endured. For thousands of years, people carried embers, tended flames, and gathered around hearths. The evidence in caves and lake shores confirms that this was no fleeting experiment. It was a long tradition, repeated countless times until it became inseparable from human life. And though we may never know exactly how they did it, the ashes tell us enough. Fire was not only encountered, it was kept. The mystery remains unsolved, yet the lesson is clear. To keep fire was to hold on to possibility. It was the first step toward full mastery, the bridge between nature's gift and human skill. Without fire-keeping, the later leaps of cooking, metallurgy, and settlement would never have been possible. The embers of this stage still glow in the soil, reminding us of a time when humans learned to guard the most fragile flame, and in doing so, changed the path of their evolution forever. As the Earth cycled through cooler phases, nights across much of Africa and Eurasia grew colder. For early humans, the chill was more than discomfort. It could threaten survival. Without thick fur or permanent shelters, they relied on movement, group cooperation, and whatever natural protections they could find. Yet with fire, a new ally entered their world. Hearths glowing in caves or open clearings offered not only light, but precious warmth. To sit near flames was to push back against the cold, to carve out a pocket of safety in the vast darkness. Archaeological evidence shows that fire use became more common during periods of climatic stress. Around 1 million years ago, glacial cycles intensified. Though great ice sheets did not yet cover Europe fully, colder conditions spread into regions where humans lived. Nights lengthened, temperatures dropped, and survival demanded new strategies. Hearths in caves such as Wonderwerk, and later at Gesher Beno Yaakov, reveal that humans repeatedly turned to fire during these intervals. Ash deposits linked with stone tools confirm occupation through seasons that would otherwise have been difficult. The presence of warmth changed daily life. Even a small fire could raise the temperature within a cave, making it possible to rest longer and more securely. This meant less energy spent shivering through the night, more strength available for daytime foraging or hunting. The glow of embers also extended the day itself. Activity could continue after sunset, whether repairing tools, tending hides, or simply staying watchful for predators. Fire transformed not only the environment but also time. A lesser-known detail lies in soot deposits found on cave ceilings. In South African sites, thin black layers coat limestone above ancient hearths. These deposits confirm that fires burned often enough and long enough to alter the cave itself. They also suggest that early humans remained in these shelters for extended stays, not only brief visits. The combination of soot, ash, and stone tools paints a picture of repeated occupation, evidence that warmth allowed humans to settle more securely in once challenging environments. Yet mysteries remain. Did these hearths burn nightly, or only during the coldest spells? Did groups manage fires large enough to heat entire chambers, or only small flames for immediate warmth? Archaeology preserves ash and soot, but not the intensity or duration of burning. Some scholars argue that early fires were modest, offering warmth to only a few individuals at a time. Others believe larger hearths may already have been constructed, though no stone rings or formal fire pits survive from these earliest contexts. The answers remain hidden in soil and stone. On a planetary scale, the spread of fire allowed humans to push boundaries. Warmth extended their reach into cooler regions of Africa and eventually into Eurasia. Each hearth was a small experiment in survival, demonstrating that with fire, humans could adapt to climates beyond their natural limits. Over time, this adaptation contributed to one of the great themes of human history: expansion into diverse habitats across the globe. Fire was both shield and passport, enabling migration into lands that once seemed too cold to endure. The cold nights themselves shaped behavior. Without fire, people may have huddled together for warmth, limiting movement after dark. With fire, they could spread slightly, keeping watch, guarding against predators whose eyes glowed at the edge of light. The psychological comfort of fire cannot be measured in artifacts, yet its effects may have been profound. The line between fear and safety, between exposure and shelter, was drawn by the circle of warmth radiating from embers. Another subtle clue comes from burned animal bones. In some sites, bones show evidence of exposure to low heat over prolonged periods. This pattern may indicate that people placed bones on fires not only for cooking, but also as fuel. Bones burned slowly, producing steady heat. In cold conditions where wood was scarce, this alternative fuel may have been valuable. If true, it reveals an early understanding of how different materials could sustain warmth, a form of experimentation born from necessity. Still, the practicalities of heating large spaces remain unresolved. Archaeologists debate whether smoke management was possible at this stage. Fires in caves produce heavy smoke, which can irritate eyes and lungs. To balance heat and air, groups may have chosen locations with natural ventilation or kept fires small to limit buildup. Soot patterns suggest both successes and challenges. Some chambers blackened completely, while others remained relatively clear. These variations hint at trial and error, an ongoing process of learning how to live with fire in confined spaces. The planetary perspective emphasizes just how significant this adaptation was. Around 1 million years ago, Earth's orbit and tilt produced long cycles of glaciation. While Africa remained warmer than higher latitudes, temperature swings were still sharp. Nights on the savanna or in upland valleys could be bitterly cold. To endure, humans needed more than physical resilience. They needed cultural strategies. Fire was one of the first, and perhaps the most transformative. The ash beneath stones, the soot on ceilings, all testify to this new relationship with climate. Step by step, fire's warmth altered not only survival but migration. Groups with reliable hearths could linger in places where nights were cold, rather than retreating. Over time, this ability paved the way for movements northward, out of Africa and into Eurasia. Fire did not alone guarantee survival, but it was part of the toolkit alongside stone tools, cooperative hunting, and shared shelter that enabled humans to expand. One unresolved question concerns whether fire was equally important in warmer regions. Archaeologists note that even in tropical zones, evidence of hearths appears. Was warmth the only reason for firekeeping, or were other benefits, light, cooking, protection, equally central? The answer may be that fire always served multiple functions. On cold nights, heat dominated. On warmer nights, fire's glow and its power to deter predators may have been more valued. In either case, warmth remained an undeniable advantage when temperatures dropped. Imagine a night 1 million years ago. Outside, the air is sharp, the sky brilliant with stars. inside a cave. A small fire glows, fed by dry branches. People gather close, their bodies silhouetted against flickering light. Smoke drifts upward, leaving thin lines on stone. The warmth spreads outward, a fragile barrier against the cold. Around this hearth, time feels different. The night is no longer endless and threatening. It has edges defined by firelight, comfort carved from the dark. In this scene lies the essence of early adaptation. Fire did not erase the cold nights, but it softened them, made them livable, transformed them from threat into manageable challenge. Each ember, preserved through dawn, was a victory, a step further along the path of human survival. Thus, the heat against the cold nights was more than a physical shield. It was a milestone, a turning point that allowed humans to remain where they otherwise could not. The archaeological record preserves its traces: ash, soot, burned bone. But the greater story is one of resilience. With fire, humanity gained not only warmth, but the confidence to face a colder world. Fire changed many aspects of early human life, but perhaps none more profoundly than food. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors ate raw plants and raw meat, chewing tough fibers, grinding seeds with their teeth, and swallowing flesh still warm from the hunt or scavenged carcass. With fire came transformation. The first meals cooked over embers were not feasts as we know them, but they marked a revolution. The texture, flavor, and safety of food shifted. Digestion changed. Nutrition increased. From ash and heat emerged a new relationship between humans and what they consumed. Archaeological evidence for early cooking is fragmentary but compelling. At Geshebenot Yaakov in Israel, dating to nearly 780,000 years ago, charred remains of nuts, seeds, and fish bones have been uncovered. The distribution of burned plant matter suggests deliberate placement near fire, not random burning from wild blazes. In Africa, burned bones at Wonderwork Cave reveal similar patterns. Exposure to controlled heat, not the uncontrolled intensity of savanna wildfires. These clues suggest that fire was already being used to alter food long before agriculture or permanent settlements appeared. One lesser-known detail involves tubers and roots. Many wild plants in Africa contain toxins or are too fibrous to eat raw. When heated, however, these plants become edible, their starches softened, their poisons neutralized. Archaeologists studying phytoliths, tiny silica structures in plants, have found evidence of heat alteration in some early sites. This suggests that the first cooks may not have been roasting meat alone, but also transforming roots into digestible staples. The practice would have broadened diets, providing energy that raw foods could not easily supply. Yet mysteries remain. Was cooking a regular practice at this stage or only occasional? Burned bones and plants do not reveal intention clearly. Some may have fallen into flames by accident. Others may have been left near hearths and scorched unintentionally. To decide whether cooking was deliberate requires patterns, repeated finds, consistent associations with hearths, and evidence that food was prepared systematically. Some scholars argue that true, habitual cooking did not emerge until later, perhaps 400,000 years ago. Others believe the evidence points to much earlier experimentation. On a planetary scale, the impact of cooking was immense. By softening food and increasing caloric availability, fire allowed humans to extract more energy from the same resources. Studies show that cooked meat provides more usable calories than raw meat, and cooked starches become digestible in ways raw starches do not. This shift may have fueled the growth of larger brains in human lineages. It also reduced the time spent chewing, freeing hours each day for other activities. Fire, therefore, was not only cultural but biological, a force that reshaped the very bodies and capacities of our species. The archaeological record includes subtle hints of this transformation. At some sites, animal bones show cut marks consistent with butchery, followed by burn marks. This sequence implies that meat was not simply burned whole, but prepared and then cooked. In other locations, concentrations of charred nutshells appear, suggesting that early humans cracked and roasted nuts for easier consumption. These details may seem small, but together they point toward growing sophistication in the use of fire for food. Still, unresolved questions linger. Did different human lineages adopt cooking at different times? Was it Homo erectus who first roasted meat? Did Neanderthals discover the value of boiling plant foods later? Or was cooking a practice that spread across populations gradually, evolving in parallel with fire-keeping? The soil holds only fragments, and scholars continue to debate. What remains clear is that wherever fire and humans met, the potential for cooking existed. Consider the sensory shift. Raw meat is chewy, sinewy, often difficult to swallow. Cooked meat is tender, aromatic, flavorful. Raw tubers are fibrous and resistant. Cooked tubers are soft and sweet. The earliest cooked meals may have been simple, roots placed near embers, bones left close to flames, fish roasted quickly on hot stones. Yet for those who first tasted them, the difference would have been striking. Cooking did not merely add calories. It transformed experience, binding people more closely to the hearth and its possibilities. A subtle but important clue comes from the use of heated stones. In some later Paleolithic sites, stones were arranged in ways suggesting that food was placed upon them for cooking. While direct evidence of such practices 1 million years ago is scarce, the presence of cracked, heat-altered rocks in association with early hearths raises possibilities. Perhaps stones were used to hold or distribute heat even in these earliest experiments. If so, humans were not simply placing food in fire, they were beginning to shape methods of cooking, however rudimentary, on a planetary level. The regular use of cooked food had far-reaching consequences. By relying less on raw meat, humans reduced their exposure to parasites. By cooking plants, they expanded dietary options beyond what raw gathering could provide. This flexibility allowed survival in varied environments, from savannas to lakeshores to caves in temperate zones. Cooking was thus not only a local innovation, but a global adaptation, shaping human dispersal across continents. Step by step, these practices became traditions. A hearth was no longer only for warmth or protection. It became a place where food was shared, where groups gathered not just for survival, but for the experience of eating together. Though archaeology cannot capture social meaning directly, the clustering of burned food remains near hearths suggests communal activity. Fire may have fostered one of the earliest forms of shared meals, a foundation for the social bonds that define humanity to this day. One unresolved puzzle concerns the timeline of habitual cooking. Some scientists argue that the brain expansion associated with Homo erectus around 1.8 million years ago must have been fueled by cooked food, implying that cooking began even earlier than current evidence shows. Others caution that the archaeological record cannot yet support this claim. For now, the question remains open. What is certain is that by the Middle Pleistocene, cooking was widespread, leaving clear marks in ash, charcoal, and bone. Imagine a scene at a lakeshore nearly 800,000 years ago. A group gathers fish from shallow waters, their scales glinting in the sun. Near the hearth, some fish are laid on hot stones, their skins curling and blackening as heat penetrates. The smell drifts across the camp, sharp and new. Roots dug from the earth are placed near the embers, their tough fibers softening. Slowly, humans take their first cooked meal together. It is not ceremony, not ritual, but survival. Yet it carries a significance far greater than any single meal. It marks a step toward the future, toward diets, societies, and bodies forever altered by fire. Thus, the first meals cooked with fire were milestones in human history. They provided more than energy. They offered safety, variety, and a reason to gather. They taught humans that flame could transform not only the environment, but life itself. From these small beginnings, burned fish, roasted roots, charred nuts, the path of humanity shifted. The ash that remains today, sifted by archaeologists from ancient soils, is fragile, but its story is immense. It tells of a moment when humans first brought food to flame, and in doing so, began to reshape their destiny. Smoke is the most visible companion of fire. Where flames exist, smoke drifts upward, carried by air currents, stretching far beyond the hearth itself. For early humans, smoke must have been both signal and presence. It marked where fire burned, long after the flames themselves were hidden. To smell it was to know that something had changed nearby. Grasslands aflame, trees blackened, or hearths tended in caves. Smoke was not only byproduct, but teacher, shaping how humans perceived distance, direction, and possibility. Across the savannas of Africa, lightning ignited dry grasses, and the smoke of wildfires could be seen for kilometers. Dark columns rose into the blue sky, twisting with the wind. At night, the faint red glow of flames joined the smoke, creating signs visible across valleys. For humans with keen senses, these were cues. Smoke meant food opportunities, as prey fled the flames. Smoke meant danger as fire approached, and smoke meant transformation, as landscapes shifted from green to black and back again. Archaeological traces of smoke are less direct than ash or charcoal, yet they exist. Soot deposits on cave ceilings confirm that smoke filled these spaces regularly. Microscopic particles trapped in sediments tell of repeated burning. Even in ancient ice cores, scientists find tiny layers of black carbon, evidence that smoke traveled across continents, carried by the wind, shaping planetary systems. Thus, smoke was not confined to one hearth or one valley. It was global, linking local fires to atmospheric change. One lesser-known detail is how smoke may have served as a gathering signal. In some modern hunter-gatherer societies, campfires produce smoke plumes visible from afar. These act as markers of occupation, guiding group members toward each other. Archaeologists speculate that early humans may have used smoke similarly, even without intention. A column rising from a cave or lakeshore hearth could be seen from distant ridges, guiding movement and contact. In this way, fire's smoke may have reshaped patterns of human interaction. Yet, mysteries remain. How did early humans perceive smoke beyond its immediate effects? Did they understand it as warning, as sign of food, or simply as background to life on fire-shaped landscapes? Archaeology cannot tell us directly. What is clear is that smoke carried meaning, even if only unconsciously. Its smell lingered on skin and tools, Its haze softened light. Its presence reminded people that fire was near. Smoke connected humans to flame, even when embers were out of sight. On a planetary scale, the circulation of smoke altered climate and ecology. Tiny particles reflected sunlight, cooling surfaces slightly. Nutrients carried in smoke settled into soils and lakes, fertilizing growth. Over time, such cycles influenced ecosystems in subtle ways. For early humans, these global shifts were invisible, yet they lived within their consequences: soils richer after fires, rivers receiving ash deposits, grasses renewed by the cycle of burning and regrowth. At the level of daily life, smoke was both ally and challenge. It deterred insects, protecting sleeping groups from bites. It drove away some predators who avoided the acrid scent. Yet it also irritated eyes, stung lungs, and darkened ceilings. To sit within a cave hearth was to accept both warmth and discomfort. Archaeologists studying soot patterns note that some chambers blackened heavily, while others remained clear. This suggests that humans experimented with fire placement, learning slowly how smoke behaved, which directions it flowed, where ventilation offered relief. A subtle but important clue comes from the analysis of fire-cracked rock. When stones were heated repeatedly in smoky hearths, they fractured, releasing particles that later settled in sediments. By studying these particles, scientists can reconstruct burning intensity and duration. Some early sites reveal long-term accumulation of such materials, pointing to consistent hearth use and thus to constant exposure to smoke. This indicates that humans did not avoid smoky environments but adapted to them, shaping habits and shelter choices accordingly. Still, unresolved questions persist. Did smoke ever play a role beyond the practical? Later in human history, smoke becomes symbolic, carrying prayers, marking rituals, representing transition between earth and sky. Was any seed of this meaning present in deep prehistory? We cannot know. Yet the constant presence of smoke around hearths, on tools, and in shelters may have shaped perception in ways more profound than simple survival. From a scale perspective, smoke linked the intimate and the vast. A single ember releasing wisps in a cave connected to clouds and winds across continents. A wildfire's plume rose into the atmosphere, altering rainfall patterns far away. For early humans, the smoke above their campfire was small, but it belonged to the same system that darkened skies after volcanic eruptions or seasonal savanna burns. Fire and smoke were local experiences tied to planetary cycles. Imagine a scene on an ancient plain. A group rests by a fire, its flames low. Smoke curls upward, shifting with the breeze. Far across the horizon, another column rises, darker, steadier, marking a grass fire ignited by lightning. The humans watch. Between them and that column lies open land, animals scattering, trees glowing faintly in flame. The smoke connects both fires, one domestic, one wild, in the same sky. For those who looked upward, the air itself carried signs of change. A lesser discussed detail is how smoke may have influenced food storage and preservation. Even without full knowledge, meat dried or smoked near hearths would last longer than raw flesh left in the open. Archaeologists cannot easily trace this practice in deep prehistory, but later traditions suggest continuity. If early humans observed that food kept near smoke spoiled less quickly, this may have been another quiet innovation linked to fire. Yet the challenge of smoke remained constant. Too much could suffocate. forcing groups to shift fires or leave caves temporarily. Balancing heat, light, and air was an ongoing experiment. The blackened ceilings of ancient shelters tell us that mistakes were common, but they also tell us that people persisted, returning to these places, learning with each generation how to live with the dual nature of smoke, both protective and harmful. On the planetary timeline, smoke accompanied humans wherever fire went. It rose above African caves, drifted across lakes in the Levant, spread through valleys of Europe. It marked the spread of fire use itself as humans expanded outward. Today, we trace its legacy in layers of soil and ice, but for early humans, smoke was immediate and tangible, a daily companion that entered lungs, eyes, and memory. Step by step, humans learned not only to keep fire, but to live with its smoke. They watched it rise, smelled its signals, endured its sting, and perhaps found in it the first faint sense of connection between earth and sky. In the thin layers of soot, in the particles carried by wind, lies the story of how fire extended beyond the hearth, shaping landscapes, communities, and atmospheres alike. Thus, smoke in the wind was never just residue. It was message, marker, and reminder. It told of fire's presence, of opportunity and risk, of transformation already underway. To breathe that air was to live within the story of fire itself, a story written not only in flame, but in the drifting trails that touched horizon and cloud. For millions of years, night was absolute. When the sun set, only the moon and stars broke the darkness. Early humans, like other animals, lived within these limits. Movement slowed, vision faltered. Predators with sharper eyes prowled unseen. But with fire, the rhythm of night changed. A hearth at the center of a group created an island of light, pushing back shadows and allowing activity to continue after sunset. The glow of fire was not only warmth, it was vision, time, and safety, all reshaped by light in the dark. Archaeological traces tell us where these early lights burned. In caves such as Wonderwerk, soot on ceilings and ash on floors confirm that fire was lit repeatedly. In open-air sites like Gesher Benot Yaakov, ash lenses and charred plants point to hearths along rivers. These fires were not large beacons but small clusters of flame. Yet even a modest fire would have cast enough glow to extend waking hours, allowing humans to interact differently with their environment. A lesser-known detail comes from the distribution of burned materials in caves. At some sites, artifacts and bones cluster around hearths in rings. This suggests that groups sat together within the circle of light, working, eating, or resting. The arrangement hints at spatial organization influenced by illumination. Fire was not only utility, it created zones of visibility, shaping where people placed themselves and their tools. Still, mysteries remain. How often were nights spent in firelight, and how often in darkness? Did every group light a hearth nightly, or was fire reserved for certain conditions? Archaeology cannot yet answer. Some researchers argue that fire use was still episodic during the early stages, meaning that many nights were passed without flames. Others suggest that once fire was kept, it became central to life. The question of continuity lingers, awaiting further evidence. On a planetary scale, the significance of artificial light is profound. For the first time, humans could alter the cycle of day and night. Other animals were bound to solar rhythms. Humans, with fire, stepped outside them. This shift echoes forward through history, from torches to oil lamps, from candles to electricity. But its roots lie in those earliest hearths, where sparks flickered against stone walls and darkness retreated. Light extended not only vision, but also memory. Archaeologists studying microscopic remains in cave sediments have found charred wood fragments small enough to suggest repeated stoking of embers rather than single large burns. This points to sustained fires glowing through long hours. Around them, people may have sharpened tools, mended hides, or shared food. Though archaeology cannot record sound, it is easy to imagine that firelight created the first spaces for extended communication. Language itself may have developed in part through such evenings, where humans gathered in light, free from the rush of daytime tasks. One unresolved puzzle is whether firelight played a role in shaping cognition. Some scientists argue that extended evening hours allowed more social interaction, which in turn promoted the growth of language, planning, and cooperation. Others caution that evidence remains circumstantial. Yet the correlation between firelight and the expansion of human capacities is striking. What is certain is that fire gave humans something unique among animals: the ability to live fully in the dark. The practical uses of light were many. It deterred predators, whose eyes glowed faintly at the edge of firelight. It exposed hazards on cave floors, sharp rocks or scorpions crawling nearby. It illuminated tools, making repair possible at night. And it allowed groups to remain alert, rotating watch while others rested. The glow of a single fire could mean survival for dozens of individuals through the long hours of darkness. A subtle clue comes from later sites where torches were used deep in caves. Blackened marks along cave walls in Europe, though younger than 1 million years, show that humans carried fire into total darkness, exploring spaces otherwise unreachable. While such evidence is later, it suggests a continuity. Once humans had fire, they sought to bring light into every environment, breaking barriers set by nature. The seed of this impulse was already present in the earliest hearths. On the planetary timeline, the change was revolutionary. Night, once a boundary, became territory. Humans learned to live in two worlds, day and firelit night. This doubled the scope of activity, allowing more time for toolmaking, planning, and perhaps the earliest rituals. Other animals retreated to darkness or relied on moonlight. Humans stayed awake, gathered around flames, weaving new possibilities in the glow. Imagine a night 1 million years ago. Outside, the savanna lies silent, except for distant calls of predators. The stars wheel overhead, brilliant without modern light. Within a cave, a fire crackles, casting red and yellow arcs on stone. Shadows stretch and shrink as logs shift. Around the hearth sit figures, their faces lit from below. Some chew roasted roots, others chip flakes from stone tools, sparks flying briefly into the dark. The air smells of smoke, sharp and earthy. For the first time, night has been reshaped, not endless, but alive with human presence. One lesser discussed effect of firelight is its impact on circadian rhythms. Modern studies show that artificial light alters sleep cycles. For early humans, fire may have done the same, extending wakefulness, delaying rest, creating new patterns of activity. While archaeology cannot prove this directly, the presence of repeated hearths suggests long evenings spent in fire's glow. This change may have altered not only behavior, but biology, gradually shaping bodies to adapt to extended waking hours. Yet challenges remained. Fire consumed fuel constantly. To maintain light through the night required steady gathering of wood. If flames died, darkness returned swiftly. Smoke accumulated in enclosed spaces, forcing choices about fire placement. Ash-covered floors, requiring constant cleaning. Living with light in the dark meant living also with its costs, balancing benefit against labor. Still, the advantage was immense. Firelight created space for imagination, for shared activity beyond the limits of day. Whether planning hunts, repairing tools, or simply watching sparks rise into the night, humans in fire's glow were already different from their ancestors. They had entered a new dimension of existence, one no other species inhabited so fully. From the smallest hearths in African caves to larger fires on riverbanks, light in the dark marked a turning point. It symbolized more than survival. It was the beginning of mastery over time itself, an extension of life into hours once closed. The glow of flames connected earth to sky, body to community, present to future. Though fragile and flickering, that light carried humanity forward, guiding steps into a world no longer bounded by night. For countless generations, humans may have relied on lightning, wildfires, and carried embers to keep flames alive. But at some point, a new possibility emerged, the creation of fire itself. This step, the science of sparks, marks one of the most debated mysteries in prehistory. To strike stone against stone and see a spark, or to spin wood until friction yields flame, is to move from dependence on nature to control over it. The archaeological record offers hints, but not certainty, of when this ability was first achieved. The earliest traces are indirect. Some stone tools from sites dating hundreds of thousands of years ago show signs of deliberate heating. Flakes bear heat-altered surfaces, their minerals transformed by exposure to high temperatures. Such patterns could be accidental, but some archaeologists suggest they reflect purposeful experiments with fire. If true, this may indicate that sparks were being produced by striking certain stones, perhaps flint against pyrite, to generate ignition. The evidence remains debated, but it hints at early curiosity about the properties of stone and flame. A lesser-known detail comes from the mineral pyrite itself, sometimes called firestone. When struck against flint, pyrite produces hot sparks that can ignite dry tinder. Archaeologists have found pyrite nodules associated with human sites, though proving their use for fire-making is difficult. At later sites, microscopic striations on pyrite surfaces reveal repeated striking, strengthening the case. If such techniques were known in deep prehistory, they would represent one of the earliest forms of controlled fire-making. Yet, mysteries remain. Did Homo erectus, living more than 1 million years ago, already know how to spark fire? Or was this knowledge developed much later, by Neanderthals or early Homo sapiens around 400,000 years ago? The archaeological record is silent. No preserved tinder bundles, no clear fire-starting kits survive from such ancient times. Instead, scholars must rely on indirect clues, patterns of hearths, intensity of burning, and associations with certain stone types. The debate continues, with no definitive answer. On a planetary scale, the invention of fire-making altered the relationship between humans and environment, no longer limited to waiting for lightning or volcanic activity. Humans with sparks in their hands could ignite flame anywhere dry fuel was available. This expanded possibilities for migration, settlement, and adaptation. With spark, fire ceased to be a gift of nature alone. It became a human tool, carried within knowledge and skill. Archaeological hints also point toward friction-based methods. Later ethnographic records show many hunter-gatherer societies creating fire by rubbing or drilling wood, spinning a stick in a carved groove, or striking dry stalks together can generate enough heat to ignite fibers. Whether such techniques existed 1 million years ago is uncertain, but the principle requires no complex technology, only persistence and observation. Some scholars argue that once humans recognized how heat built through friction, the step toward fire-making was inevitable. One subtle clue lies in the controlled temperatures of early hearths. At some sites, ash layers suggest repeated burning at moderate intensities, not the irregular extremes of wildfires. To maintain such conditions, humans would have needed not only to keep fire, but to restart it when lost. This raises the possibility that techniques for ignition were already in use, even if rarely preserved. Without such methods, reliance on lightning alone seems insufficient to explain the long continuity of fire evidence across regions. Still, unresolved puzzles abound. If fire-making was achieved so early, why does clear evidence not appear more consistently in the record? Some suggest that perishable materials, like wooden fire drills, simply decayed beyond recognition. Others argue that fire-making was rare at first, practiced by only a few groups, and spread slowly across populations. The absence of direct artifacts does not prove absence of knowledge. It may reflect the fragility of the materials involved. On the scale of daily life, the ability to spark fire would have transformed routine. No longer tied to chance ignitions, groups could light fires in damp valleys, cool mornings, or after heavy rains. Hunting strategies could shift, with fire used to drive animals or clear vegetation. Cooking became more reliable, no longer dependent on whether embers survived a journey. The rhythm of human life grew freer, more flexible, shaped less by the unpredictability of nature. A lesser discussed aspect of sparks is their role in tool-making. Striking flint and pyrite not only produced flame, but also sharp flakes. The dual use of stones may have encouraged experimentation, as humans noticed both sparks and cutting edges. Archaeologists studying wear patterns on early tools note that repeated striking may have served multiple purposes, blurring the line between tool production and fire creation. This overlap suggests that curiosity about sparks may have arisen naturally from the act of knapping stone. Planetary echoes of this development are profound. Once fire could be made at will, humans gained a new form of energy control. Other animals adapted to fire passively, fleeing flames or exploiting burned landscapes. Humans, by contrast, began to shape ecosystems deliberately, using fire to alter vegetation and influence animal movements. This process, sometimes called fire ecology, has roots in the science of sparks. The step from keeping to making fire was not only cultural, it was ecological, influencing landscapes on scales far beyond individual hearths. Consider the effort of early spark making. A piece of pyrite held firmly, a flint struck sharply against it. Tiny sparks leap out, vanishing almost instantly unless caught by dry fibers. With practice, sparks find tinder, shredded grass, fungus, or bark, and ignite. A small ember glows, coaxed with breath into flame. For the first time, humans hold within their own hands the power once belonging only to lightning. The moment is fragile, yet monumental. It changes everything. Yet the timeline of this change remains uncertain. Some scholars argue that fire making is visible only in the archaeological record after 300,000 years ago, when hearths become larger, more regular, and more widespread. Others push the date back, suggesting that hints of earlier knowledge are hidden in the patchy evidence. What is certain is that by the time Homo sapiens spread widely across the globe, fire-making was well established, forming a foundation for all later human development. Step by step. The science of sparks advanced. It may have begun as accident, stone striking stone in tool-making, a spark falling unnoticed. It may have continued as curiosity, observing sparks and experimenting with tinder. Eventually, it became skill, knowledge passed between generations, refined through practice, repeated until reliable. Each ember caught from stone was a victory. Each flame, born from friction, a testament to ingenuity. Thus, the science of spark stands as a quiet revolution in prehistory. Though the evidence is incomplete, the implications are vast. Fire was no longer borrowed from nature. It was summoned by human hands. With that step, humanity crossed a threshold that would never be reversed. The glow of fire became not only constant, but controllable, no longer bound to storms, but carried in the memory of how to strike stone or spin wood. In the soil and in the imagination, sparks mark the dawn of human mastery over flame. By 1 million years ago, fire was no longer confined to a single cave or valley. Evidence shows that its use began to appear in scattered places across Africa, and later in Eurasia. Each site preserves only fragments, ash, charcoal, burned bone, but together they sketch a pattern. Fire spreading across the ancient world, accompanying humans as they expanded into new landscapes. This distribution reveals how universal the attraction to flame had become, even among different human lineages living far apart. In Africa, the earliest signs remain strongest. Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, with its deep layers of ash and burned bone, is one of the most convincing examples of early fire use. To the north, in Kenya and Ethiopia, other sites hold more ambiguous traces: heated stone tools, pockets of charcoal, fragments of bone darkened by flame. While some may be natural, their association with human tools suggests deliberate contact with fire. Across the continent, evidence points to a growing familiarity. Humans no longer avoided fire but integrated it into daily life. Farther afield, traces appear in the Levant. Gesher Benot Yaakov in Israel, dated to nearly 780,000 years ago, offers a remarkable record. Here, archaeologists uncovered multiple hearths containing burned seeds, nuts, and fish bones. The hearths are spatially organized when it's scattered, suggesting repeated use over long periods. And this site demonstrates that by this time, fire was not only used for warmth, but also for cooking and food preparation. It represents a milestone, a glimpse of humans treating fire as an integral, habitual part of life. A lesser-known detail from Gesher Beno Yaakov involves water plants. Researchers found charred remains of aquatic vegetation, including seeds that grow only in wetlands. This indicates that early humans were gathering diverse foods from lakeshores and deliberately cooking them. Fire, in this context, expanded diets beyond raw foraging. It was a tool of transformation, reshaping what could be eaten and how energy was obtained from the land. In Europe, and the evidence arrives later, at sites like Vertesolos in Hungary and Beech's Pit in England, fire traces appear around 400,000 years ago. Hearths with concentrated ash and burned flint suggest repeated fire-making and use. Some sites even show signs of structured hearths, pits dug to contain flames. These discoveries reveal that as humans expanded into colder latitudes, fire became essential. Without it, nights in Ice Age, Europe would have been unbearable. With it, survival was possible, migrations extended, and populations grew. Still, mysteries remain. Was the spread of fire knowledge continuous, moving steadily from Africa to Eurasia? Or did different groups discover fire's use independently, guided by the same observations of lightning and wildfires? Archaeologists debate this. Some propose cultural transmission, passed along as populations moved. Others argue for convergence, separate groups, facing similar challenges, learning similar lessons. The truth may be a mixture of both. Fire's value was so universal that its discovery may have occurred multiple times, in different places, across millennia. On a planetary scale, this distribution matters. As humans dispersed, they brought fire with them or learned it anew, reshaping ecosystems in diverse regions. In African savannas, fire was part of natural cycles, renewing grasses and feeding herds. In European forests, it cleared undergrowth, opening spaces for settlement. Along lake shores in the Levant, it cooked aquatic plants and fish, expanding diets. Each environment presented unique challenges, and fire became the universal solution, adaptable to all. Another subtle clue comes from the pattern of burned bones across continents. In South Africa, bones show moderate heating, suggesting controlled hearths. In Israel, bones show both cooking and waste disposal in flames. In Europe, higher intensity burns suggest experiments with fire as a tool for altering materials, perhaps even hardening wooden spears. These differences hint that fire was not static. Its uses evolved as humans adapted it to their needs. Still, unresolved questions remain about gaps in the record. For tens of thousands of years, fire evidence vanishes in certain regions. Was fire forgotten, or has the evidence simply eroded? Some scholars argue that early fire use was fragile, dependent on circumstance, and easily lost. Others believe continuity existed, but the archaeological traces are too subtle to survive. Ash and charcoal are light, easily scattered, easily washed away. The patchy record may reflect preservation, not absence. Consider the scale of these dispersals. From southern Africa to northern Europe is a distance greater than from Cairo to the Arctic Circle. To imagine early humans carrying embers across such ranges is daunting, yet whether carried or rediscovered, fire appears again and again in distant places. It was not confined to one lineage or one land. It was humanity's shared inheritance, a constant companion of migration. One lesser-known aspect of this story involves Asia. In China, at sites like Zhoukoudian near Beijing, layers of ash and burned bone dating to around 700,000 years ago suggest fire use by Homo erectus. Though debated, some argue the ash may be natural deposits. Recent studies strengthen the case for human involvement. If correct, this would mean that fire use extended across much of the Old World far earlier than once believed, linking Africa, Eurasia, and East Asia in a common thread of flame. On a planetary timeline, fire use across continents marks the beginning of a truly global adaptation. Humans no longer survived only where climate allowed. With fire, they shaped microclimates around themselves, creating warmth, light, and cooked food wherever they went. This flexibility was the foundation for later expansions into Ice Age tundra, into deserts, into islands across oceans. Fire was the first great equalizer, enabling humans to inhabit nearly every environment on Earth. Imagine a chain of scenes across the ancient world. In South Africa, Embers glow in a cave, smoke curling toward limestone ceilings. In Israel, a group roasts fish by the lakeshore, the smell drifting over still water. In China, Homo erectus tends flames near the mouth of a cavern, using firelight to carve tools. In Europe, hearths crackle against the cold, sparks rising into the long winter night. Each scene is separate, yet together they form a mosaic, scattered across continents but united by flame. Step by step, the evidence accumulates: ash beneath stones, soot on ceilings, burned seeds by riverbanks, all are pieces of the same story. Fire did not belong to one group alone. It spread, was rediscovered, was adapted, until it became universal. Across the ancient world, humans learned the same lesson. To live with fire was to expand the boundaries of survival. Thus, Section 13 reveals fire not as a local curiosity but as a global phenomenon. From Africa to Eurasia, from caves to lakeshores, fire's traces lie in soil and stone, fragile but persistent. They remind us that humanity's path was not linear or confined, but wide and interconnected. Fire was the thread linking scattered populations across continents, binding the human story together with smoke, ash, and light. Even with more than a century of archaeological research, the origins of fire control remain among the most contested questions in human prehistory. Evidence is scattered, often fragmentary, and interpretation depends on fragile traces. Flecks of charcoal, thin ash lenses, discolored stone. From these small clues, scholars must decide whether fire was encountered, kept, or truly mastered. The debates that follow reveal not only the difficulty of studying deep time, but also the importance of fire as a defining element of humanity. Some researchers point to Wonderwork Cave in South Africa as the earliest clear evidence of controlled fire, around 1 million years ago. Ash and burned bone deep inside its chambers could not have come from natural wildfires, suggesting deliberate human action. Others argue that while the fire was clearly inside the cave, it may have been brought in from outside and used opportunistically, not yet fully mastered. The distinction between use and control becomes critical. Was fire an occasional tool or a constant companion? A lesser-known detail comes from the site of Zhoukoudian in China. For decades, layers of ash and burned bone were thought to represent hearths of Homo erectus, dating to around 700,000 years ago. This interpretation placed fire use firmly within the toolkit of early humans in East Asia. But later studies questioned whether the ash was truly from hearths or instead from back guano altered by chemical processes. The debate continues, showing how fragile evidence can swing interpretation dramatically. One unresolved mystery is whether the knowledge of fire originated once and spread, or arose multiple times independently. Some archaeologists suggest that early humans migrating out of Africa carried fire knowledge with them, passing it along to new regions. Others propose that different groups discovered or rediscovered fire's use on their own, guided by similar observations of wildfires. The global record is patchy enough that both views remain possible. Fire may have been both shared and reinvented, its value too great to remain confined to one lineage or place. On a planetary scale, this debate reflects the universal challenge faced by humans in diverse environments. In Africa's savanna, wildfires were common, providing frequent opportunities to experiment with fire. In wetter climates, such as parts of Europe or tropical forests, lightning ignitions were rarer, making fire harder to obtain. The spread of controlled fire use may thus reflect ecological differences as much as cultural ones. Regions rich in natural fire offered more opportunities for learning, while others required deliberate invention. Scholars also debate the definition of control. Does carrying an ember into a cave count? Does tending a natural flame qualify? Or must control mean the ability to create fire at will? These questions complicate interpretation. Evidence of kept fire, repeated hearths, soot, ash, shows that humans used fire. But evidence of fire-making, such as wear marks on pyrite or clear tinder use, appears much later. Some argue that true control must include creation, while others see keeping and tending as the first essential step. A subtle clue in this debate comes from magnetic studies of burned sediments. Heating soils realigns magnetic minerals, confirming in-place burning rather than post-depositional changes. At sites like Gesher Benot Yaakov, such studies strengthen claims of deliberate fire use nearly 780,000 years ago. Yet skeptics remain cautious, pointing out that localized wildfires could also produce such signals. The line between natural and cultural fire is thin, and interpretation depends on context. Another major question is which human lineages achieved control first. Was it Homo erectus in Africa or Asia? Were Neanderthals early masters of flame? Or was it Homo sapiens who finally achieved full fire-making? Evidence shows that Neanderthals in Europe used fire regularly, with clear hearths dating to around 200,000 years ago. But whether they could spark fire independently remains debated. Some archaeologists argue that Neanderthals relied heavily on fire but lacked the ability to generate it, obtaining flames only from natural sources. Others believe they possessed fire-making tools, though direct evidence is scarce. The debate extends even to Homo sapiens. While our species is clearly adept at fire-making today, some scholars argue that early Homo sapiens may also have relied on opportunistic fire use at first, mastering ignition only later. The timeline of full control, therefore, remains uncertain, shifting with each new discovery. Fire, so central to humanity, resists easy origin stories. On the scale of daily life, these debates matter. If early humans kept fire but could not make it, their lives were shaped by vigilance, guarding embers constantly, fearing the loss of flame. If they could make fire at will, their lives were freer, more flexible, more secure. Archaeological traces cannot yet decide which was true, but they suggest that the transition from opportunistic use to full mastery was gradual, not sudden. It was a long road, with many experiments, failures, and rediscoveries. Planetary evidence adds perspective. Layers of charcoal in lake sediments show that fire was widespread across landscapes long before human mastery. Lightning and volcanoes provided flame without human help. But the increasing presence of fire evidence at human sites suggests that by at least 400,000 years ago, humans had moved beyond passive observation. Whether this meant true ignition or only constant tending, fire had become an inseparable part of human existence. One lesser discussed aspect of this debate involves the ecological consequences of fire use. Even before agriculture, humans may have influenced landscapes through deliberate burning. Some archaeologists argue that by 200,000 years ago, people were already setting small fires to clear vegetation or attract animals. If true, this would mean that debates about control extend beyond hearths to entire ecosystems. Fire was not only a domestic tool, but a landscape strategy, marking the beginning of humanity's ecological impact on a planetary scale. Still, mysteries remain unresolved. Why does evidence of fire appear in some regions and disappear in others for long stretches of time? Why do some sites show intense, repeated burning while others remain silent? These gaps frustrate archaeologists and remind us of the fragility of the record. Ash can wash away, charcoal can decay, caves can collapse. Much of fire's history may simply be lost to time, leaving only fragments for interpretation. Imagine the contrast across ancient worlds. In one cave, ash piles grow as fires burn nightly, smoke blackening ceilings. In another valley, humans live without fire for seasons, waiting for lightning to strike dry grass. In one lineage, sparks from flint and pyrite may already be known. In another, embers alone are guarded carefully, never replaced when lost. Across continents, experiences diverged, yet all were part of the same slow progression toward mastery. Step by step, the debates of origin and control remind us that fire was not a single invention, but a process, a relationship forged over hundreds of thousands of years. Its traces are ambiguous because its history was complex, uneven, and spread across diverse groups. To argue about its beginnings is to acknowledge how central it became. Fire was not discovered once. It was learned, relearned, and carried forward until it became universal. Thus, Section 14 stands not only as a record of debate but as a reminder of uncertainty. Ash, soot, and charcoal tell us that fire was there. But whether it was borrowed, kept, or made, we cannot yet say with final certainty. What is clear is that fire shaped every lineage that touched it, and its control, whenever it began, marked a threshold unlike any other in human history. When we look back across 1 million years of human history, the story of fire appears not as a single discovery, but as a long unfolding, from distant wildfires on the savannah to hearths in caves, from smoke on the wind to sparks struck from stone. Fire accompanied humanity step by step. Its legacy is immense. It shaped bodies, diets, migrations, societies, and even the atmosphere of the planet. To speak of the legacy of the flame is to speak of humanity itself, for the two became inseparable. The biological impact of fire is profound. Cooking softened foods, broke down toxins, and released calories more efficiently than raw diets ever could. This change may have supported the growth of larger brains in Homo erectus and later lineages. By spending less energy chewing and digesting, humans gained more energy for thought, movement, and social activity. Fire thus nourished not only the body but also the mind, providing the foundation for the cognitive leap that defined our species. A lesser-known detail comes from studies of dental wear. Fossil teeth from early humans often show heavy wear patterns consistent with raw diets. Later fossils, particularly after 400,000 years ago, reveal smoother surfaces and fewer fractures, suggesting softer, cooked foods, though indirect. This evidence supports the view that fire's legacy is written in our very bones and teeth. Cooking became so integral that human physiology adapted to it, leaving behind jaws and teeth less suited to raw survival. Yet mysteries remain. Did fire drive brain growth directly, or was it one of many factors, alongside cooperation, tool use, and changing climates? Scholars continue to debate. Some argue that without cooking, the caloric demands of large brains could not have been met. Others caution that evidence is not conclusive. What is clear is that fire was part of the mosaic, one of several forces shaping human evolution, but perhaps the most transformative. On a planetary scale, The impact of fire extends far beyond diet. Fire altered ecosystems wherever humans went. By burning landscapes, whether deliberately or through the simple presence of hearths, humans reshaped vegetation patterns, influenced animal movements, and enriched soils with ash. In Africa, natural and human fires combined to sustain savanna ecosystems. In Europe and Asia, fire opened forests, creating clearings that changed the balance of species. Even in deep prehistory, the human footprint on Earth was traced in flame. The social legacy of fire is equally enduring. Hearths became centers of life. Archaeological sites reveal clusters of artifacts around fireplaces, suggesting that people gathered there to work, eat, and rest. Fire provided warmth and protection, but it also created a space for interaction. Some scholars argue that language and storytelling may have flourished around the firelight, where people had time and safety to share. Though unprovable, the idea is compelling. The first human communities may have been forged in the circle of flame. A subtle clue to this legacy comes from the repeated placement of hearths in the same spots within caves. Over generations, fire returned to familiar places, creating continuity across time. These repeated hearths suggest memory, tradition, and perhaps the first hints of cultural practice. Fire was not only practical, it was remembered, shared, and passed down. Still, unresolved puzzles remain. Was fire equally central for all human groups? Or did some lineages survive largely without it for long periods? Archaeological gaps suggest that fire use was uneven. Some regions hold dense layers of ash, while others show none for tens of thousands of years. Perhaps fire knowledge was lost and regained many times. Perhaps some groups thrived without it, depending on climate and resources. The legacy of the flame may therefore be uneven, woven from many local stories rather than a single global narrative. On a planetary timeline, the legacy of fire continues into the present. The control of energy began with flames in caves and riversides. From there, humans learned to burn wood, charcoal, and eventually coal, oil, and gas. Every modern city, every light switched on at night, carries echoes of those first hearths. The energy systems that shape our world today are descendants of that primal relationship. Fire was humanity's first energy revolution, the one upon which all others were built. Consider how fire influenced migration. With flames for warmth, humans expanded into colder zones of Eurasia. With cooked food, they survived in environments with fewer edible plants. With light, they extended activity into the night, multiplying their opportunities for survival. Without fire, such expansions may have been impossible. In this sense, the legacy of flame is written across maps, the spread of humans into every continent, every climate, every niche of the earth. One lesser discussed dimension of this legacy involves predators. Firelight deterred lions, leopards, and hyenas. Archaeological studies of animal remains in caves show fewer predation marks on human bones than might be expected. Fire may have played a role in reducing vulnerability, giving humans an advantage over other species. Over time, predators learned to avoid firelight, altering their behavior. Thus, the flame reshaped not only humans, but also the animals around them. Still, fire's legacy is not only positive. Smoke-filled caves, irritating eyes and lungs, ash built up on floors, requiring constant cleaning. Accidents with flames could cause burns, perhaps even death. The double-edged nature of fire shaped human caution, teaching respect for its dangers. This duality, life-giving yet destructive, remains part of fire's meaning today. Imagine the perspective of scale. From a single ember caught on dry grass to the global fires that shaped ecosystems, flame linked the small and the vast. Each hearth was intimate, serving a handful of individuals, but together, millions of hearths across time altered landscapes, diets, and bodies. The legacy of flame is both personal and planetary, fragile and immense. Archaeology reminds us of this scale through its traces. Ash flecks smaller than a grain of rice reveal choices that shaped evolution. Soot stains on ceilings tell of nights lit by flame. Burned bones whisper of meals shared. These traces are modest, yet they reveal the foundation of human history. Without them, there would be no cities, no metallurgy, no agriculture, no modern energy. Fire's legacy is the ground upon which all else was built, step by step. Humans learned not only to live with fire, but to carry it forward, across continents, across climates, across lineages. The flame endured. Its legacy is survival, expansion, innovation, and memory. Even now, though we command vast sources of power, the sight of a small fire carries ancient resonance. It recalls warmth in the cold, light in the dark, food transformed, community gathered. Thus, Section 15 closes with recognition. Fire's legacy is not past but present. From the first hearths in African caves to the global networks of energy today, flame has been humanity's constant companion. Its control was the turning point, the foundation upon which all later histories rest. The legacy of the flame is the legacy of humankind itself, fragile, enduring, and forever written in ash, smoke, and light. The story of fire stretches across more than 1 million years. From the faintest flecks of charcoal hidden in ancient soil to the clear hearths preserved in caves, the evidence tells of a long companionship between humankind and flame. It was not a single discovery, not one sudden leap, but a slow weaving of knowledge into life. Fire was observed, then tended, then kept, and finally made. Each step shaped bodies, societies, and the landscapes of Earth itself. Yet much remains unknown. We cannot say with certainty when sparks were first struck, or which lineage held the first ember in their hands. We cannot see the faces of those who gathered at night, watching shadows dance against stone walls. We hold only fragments, ash beneath stones, soot on ceilings, burned seeds by rivers. Still, these fragments are enough. They tell us that humans lived with fire, and that in living with it, they became something new. The legacy endures. Every lamp, every stove, every light glowing in the night sky of modern cities carries echoes of that first fire. The warmth against cold, the glow against darkness, the transformation of food, all remain as threads linking us to the deep past. Fire is not only history, it is continuity, a flame carried across time. And so the story settles into stillness. The embers fade, leaving quiet ash. The night sky stretches above, as it did for our ancestors. What remains is simple: the memory of light, the endurance of warmth, the companionship of fire, an inheritance that endures within us all.